Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Chuang, and like Jason said, I'm a lead front-end developer working at Macy's.com with 5 years of experience in front-end development. And I'm very excited today to be here to share with you guys my experience and skills I learned along my way as a front-end developer. So people will ask, why is front-end development important? Well, front-end development is important as it bridges the gap between multiple devices through the browser. So when you create a website, it could easily be used on a desktop, on mobile, or on an iPad. So it's device agnostic. And you can have one code base, and that code base can be shared across multiple platforms and reach a broad audience. And in this presentation, I wanted to consolidate a couple key concepts that are fundamental to front-end developer in 2017. And I would like to share my insights with you in hopes that it will help others along the way trying to learn or pursue a career in front-end development. So who is this lecture for? It's for everyone who's interested in learning more about front-end development and also getting a general overview of what front-end development does. So I'll be starting from talking about the role of front-end development and how it plays into the broader development cycle, and then focus in on some key concepts that are crucial and foundational to all front-end developer. And lastly, I'll be sharing some insights for the interview process and tips for each steps during the process. Okay. So a little about me. I actually, interesting enough, I actually started off graduating as a electrical computer engineer in Washington, D.C. I was gonna go pre-medical, but I decided not to, and I decided computer science and programming was more of my thing. And I wanted to share my story because although I didn't study computer science as my degree in college, I still did a lot of self-learning and to become a front-end developer and using the resources and online to help me learn along the way. So I started off working in Washington, D.C. as a consultant, and it was being Washington, D.C., it was mostly government contracts. And the it was during that time, you have to understand mobile wasn't a big thing yet. It wasn't, definitely not as popular as it was today. But the good thing is there's a lot of platforms during that time that allow you to bootstrap or learn quickly about the front end as a general. So Twitter Bootstrap was huge back then. It was probably only Twitter Bootstrap 1.0 or 2.0, but it was something to help me get off the ground and start learning about HTML, CSS, JavaScript in general. So I started off building projects for NIH, the National Institute of Health, for the government, and then I worked in the Veterans Affairs. And slowly I gained my knowledge, and I took a leap of faith to move to Silicon Valley, knowing that this is where the bleeding edge tech is going to be, and it's where I see myself. And luckily enough, I had a remote project that allows me to work remotely and help me make the move along the way. And looking back, I think being a front-end developer or any programmer in general requires a lot of dedication and determination. So it's like I would liken it to learning a language. If you try to learn a foreign language, you need to practice every day and just take it bits and pieces until you build up your vocabulary, your knowledge, and the grammar skill that allows you to build bigger projects. So for those looking to become a front-end developer, I encourage you to persevere and be determined and optimistic. Cool. So now that you know a little bit more about me, let's dive in deeper. So what is a front-end developer, or what do they do? So I'm going to quote Wikipedia here. So front-end development, it's also known as client-side development, is the practice of producing HTML, CSS, JavaScript for a website or web application so that a user can see and interact with them. So in other words, it's the closest layer in development to the user, which is really important because that's what they see first. So this is a useful infographic on showing how front-end development plays in a bigger picture in a whole development cycle. So as you can see, step one, when a site is loaded, when you go to a URL through your browser, client-side scripts are loaded. A request is sent from your computer to the internet to the backend, and then we get a response. We get a response back from the backend serving the client-side scripts. So these client-side scripts gets run in the browser by the browser and serves it back to the user. But to retrieve user data from the database, JavaScript and using asynchronous JavaScript calls, we're also sent to the backend to retrieve the information that you need. So the front end is essentially taking data from the backend, data structures, and serving it to the user in an organized fashion using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And step 4 is more about how backend processes these data and using the right parameters, getting the right request, and sending it back. So like as we see here down below, so important aspect of a front-end developer is responsiveness, so that the website could be displayed in a orderly fashion on different devices, including mobile, iPad, and laptops. And everything is built out of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are the core components of front-end work. So this next slide gives us also a bird's eye view of how different skill set needed for the different positions in terms of web application development. So starting from the left, you can see that the spectrum goes from human focus to technology focus. So to start off with the project, the best way to start off, I should say, is to start off with research and user experience in general. So you understand the user behavior and a pattern and what drives their action on the site. But sometimes this is often a luxury that most smaller teams don't have. And they usually start off with the UI developer since they overlap some of the user experience designer work. So the main focus of user experience designer, or UI UX, is to do research and information design, and also some interaction design between different flows or different pages. And I will speak more to this later on. And you can see that the UI developer is sort of the middle guy. It bridges what backend does and also takes in the mockups, the wireframes given by the user designer, UX designer, and builds it out. So it's actually a key component that interfaces between the business logic and what the consumers see and use on a daily basis. And as you can see here, graphic designer is a branch out of user designer as they overlap and focus on visual design. So let's dive deeper into each position and to explore what their main focus is. So starting with the beginning, UI UX designer. So they're mainly driven by, like I said, user research, behavior, and human psychology. They need to go deep into what the users desire and what would drive the most action or the desired action out of them. Another key point for user experience designer is information hierarchy. What do I mean by information hierarchy? Information hierarchy is how components of data gets presented. Let me give you an example. So when you're on a product page trying to buy something from Amazon, there's a few key elements of that page that appear on all pages. Of course, you have the title of the product, maybe the subtitle, reviews, and price, as well as the description. So UI UX designer, they have to sort of prioritize and organize these blocks of data in an orderly fashion so that it's easy for the user, creates a good experience, and also drives action. So that's really a key factor of what they do on a daily basis. And they support that by research. And if you want to go, that's information design is more on a page level. But if you want to go on a even higher level, you go to interaction design, which manages the flow from page to page. So let's say this is more from, I'll give another example. Say you want to go to Amazon and you want to buy something. Or that's the purpose of Amazon. They want you to buy something. So they want you to shop on their site. So interaction design is about how this website takes user from the search or browse page to the product page itself. And then when you click on add to cart, it takes you to the checkout page. And then finally, order confirmation page. So interaction design is about the interaction and the pattern between the flow between different pages that ultimately leads to the desired goal. And that's quite important too. And of course, there's also user interface design, which ties in closely to these two, and it pretty much is the sum of these two together. And how do UI UX designers present their idea and their research through wireframes and mockups? This is how they visualize or this construct of the application and present it in a GUI or a graphical user interface for them to see. Okay, so next, this is, before I go deep into front end and back end, I just want to show you this graphics I found online. So front end, the user is over here, and you see a mermaid on a rock. So the user always see the front end as the fancy part of the site, and the portion of the site that allows them to click, and the cool animation, the nice pictures, and the pretty graphics. But that's what front end tries to do, because it's trying to hide the back end beast, which is complex, and make it simple for their user. So I really like this graphic because it really shows what the role front end plays in this in relations to the user and the back end. So let's start from the back end first, because that's where let's leave the front end to the last. So back end developer, they are responsible for the main application logic, and this is a huge piece of the application too, because it has to process and store great amount of data and also secure it at the same time. Because usually in an application, we have streams of data coming from users, and we have to make sense of it in an organized fashion. So what a backend developer does is they're responsible for processing, storing, and securing these data. and most of them are responsible for choosing the right framework for the right project. So they basically set the ground, they set the infrastructure of how the whole application is going to behave. And it will greatly impact the application if this is not done so correctly, as well as choosing the right database. So framework and database, they tie in closely with each other in building the back-end database for the application. And also they need to be also aware about third-party integration, because nowadays companies release APIs for data retrieval. So we actually have access to multiple streams of data in different categories, and if we can make use of these APIs, we can pull in different data and gain insight from a combination of them. So backend developer also needs to be familiar with third-party integration. And lastly, they have to serve up the data in a fashion so that the front-end developers can consume. So they work closely with the front-end, discussing maybe the data structure or the data format that's returned from a request. So usually comes back in maybe a JSON format. All right, now we're gonna talk about front-end developer, as you guys are interested. So front-end developer, most people would think that it's mainly just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? But in reality, if you're working for a big company, front-end developer plays a huge role, because it's responsible for the client-side architecture. What do I mean by that? So as your site or application grows, there's gonna be become more difficult to manage different pages. So it's important to have a framework that allows you to build upon, to work as like a track that you can branch out of. And as many of you may know, a lot of them has become popular nowadays, including React, which is probably the most popular frameworks right now, and Angular, created by Google, as well as Backbone back in the days. So these are all frameworks that you could use to help in your front-end development. And also, aside from architecture, extensibility and modularization is also quite important when building in a project along with other developers. So what do I mean by extensibility? So extensibility is how it's how to future-proof your application. We want each piece of application to be modularized like Lego blocks, so that you could build applications reusing the pieces as you wish. So let me give an example. If I want to build an application, I know that there are some key components, like maybe the login page, a login module, but I don't necessarily want that to appear in just one page. If I create a modular function for it, I would be able to reuse that component when I wish. So extensibility and modularization, that's one key part of front-end development, because as the site grows larger and larger, you want your pieces to be reusable so you can build new functionality. Okay, and then next is optimization. Optimization is about compressing data and making the site load faster. As you know, some of you may know, when we try to make a request from the front end, there's always a couple milliseconds that that's required to send the packet and get the response back. And as a front end developer, we try to optimize our website by reducing the calls made, so that the average in the industry, I would say it's 10 milliseconds per call made. So if you make 10 calls, that will add up. They add up, and that would decrease the user experience because the site will load slower. So we try to minimize the calls made to help with load time. So one interesting fact that I learned working at Macy's is that if a site loads more than 3 seconds, 50% of the traffic drops off. So, which is extremely crucial. And this is talking about mobile. So mobile traffic, people aren't patient nowadays. If your site is slow, people will drop off, and that is not something we desire. So as a front-end developer, we seek to prevent that by optimizing the website. Okay, next, compatibility. What do I mean by compatibility? As a front-end developer, we're managing one code, one huge code of the website. So we, and this code is shared across multiple platforms, including iPhone, iPad, and laptop. So we have to, and more than that, it's shared across different browsers too. So we have to ensure browser compatibility as well as device compatibility. And front-end developer has to be aware of all those. So probably not as simple as you guys thought from the beginning, but it's actually a huge task to tackle. And you face many, you need to fight several fronts to be good at being a front-end developer. Cool. So, all right, what is a full stack developer then? A full stack developer is actually someone who knows part of front end and back end. And these are really rare creatures because to know both sides really well, it takes a lot of mastery and a lot of dedication. But front end, when you join a big team of developers, usually in the end, you'll eventually split into a front end team and a back end team, because when you know everything, when you know so much, sometimes it's hard to make up a decision when there's different ways of doing things. There's multiple ways of doing things. So we usually divide it up into a front end and back end team so that front end can specialize in what they do and do it best. And same for the back end. They can be focused entirely on data and do it the best way possible. So that's full stack developers for you. Okay, and so this, before I end the conclusion on like the bigger scheme, the bigger picture, I think this graph does a pretty good job at showing some of the skills that are needed to pursue a career in each position. And I think the figures here it doesn't scale to how strongly you are in this area, but more or less about the percentage of developers that think that rated themselves as intermediate to expert in this level. As you can see, backend developers are more focused on Java, but I don't think this is fair because there's multiple of backend languages that are that backend developers use. So this probably doesn't paint a good picture for backend developer, but for front-end developer, you can see that the bulk is JavaScript, CSS. Sorry, this is full stack developer. So full stack developer also works a lot with JavaScript, and they're a good roundup of each piece of technology here because they have to be able to doodle in the front end side and as well as the back end side. And front end developer, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, of course, most important. And I would say now the front end developer and UI developer are actually, I would kind of liken them to be interchangeable because they pretty much know the same technology stack and work on mostly the same task. But front-end developer, I would say, will be also more fluent in the frameworks. While UI developer, probably less so, and more focused on with a little bit of graphics and user experience involved in UI developer's role. So now we're in 2017. What are some of the challenges that front-end developers face? So with this slide, I just want to quickly introduce some new topics that might be interesting to branch off into learning. It's going to be an entire different topic, but I'd just like to highlight a couple interesting things that are going on in front-end development. So the role of front-end development is ever changing, and some of these new skills are critical in 2017. So optimization, Webpack. What is Webpack? Webpack is a library that allows you to bundle up your assets on a front-end application. What do I mean by that? So when you build out an application, there's going to be many files and scripts shared between multiple pages across your site. There's some that are going to be common, some that are going to be used only for that one particular page. But what Webpack does is it bundles up all the assets and only serves you the necessary assets for that particular page you're visiting. And this is extremely powerful because now users no longer need to load unnecessary assets and take up loading time, increase the loading time. Now that could be optimized by loading only the necessary material to build out that page. So Webpack is something that's interesting going on in the industry, and it's worth looking more into. And also, another common trend is modularization. Modularization is how to build components from JavaScript and to make them reusable, like I mentioned earlier. So this is where functional programming replaces object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming, as some of the backends may know, is based on a class inheritance. But functional programming breaks that apart and uses the concept of a building block that I mentioned earlier to build out the application so that your application can be reusable. So usually we use AMDs, or asynchronous module definitions, build out different modules that could be required and used as you wish. And also another trend is integration. So integration, what do I mean by integration? So integration is about how you integrate APIs from third-party, or whether it's third-party or even an API built by your own team or your own project, and how to consume those in a more organized fashion or in a way that improves load time, benefiting the site. So what do you, the most common skills needed, of course, AJAX, async, asynchronous calls, and also promise and callbacks are greatly critical in this area and would probably be used a lot in nowadays. And okay, so the next question is, what talents are most in demand for front-end development? And to answer, it's really Angular and React, because these are the two major frameworks that companies are looking for nowadays. Because React is trending upwards, while Angular is already pretty steady and has a pretty big group of users that's supporting it right now. But React is definitely the most popular framework right now to learn. But I want to point out also that even though frameworks come out every once in a while and they get updated, the most important skills, they don't change, which is vanilla JavaScript, plain JavaScript. Because if your foundation is solid, it will help you in the long run learning these different frameworks. Because there's already a trend going on from when I started in front-end development till now. Every few years or so, there's going to be a new framework that comes up, and you just have to be prepared for it. You have to stay updated and stay synced up with what's going on right now. But more important, you have to have a solid foundation. Okay, so that's that. And so some challenges faced by front-end development when you're working in teams. One thing is when you're working on a big project, you got to have adaptability. So what do I mean by that? So you have to make your code easy to read and to be able to work alongside other front-end developers, because this is not just a project that you're going to be working on. Multiple developers will be touching this project. So an important aspect of it is making your code, adding comments, making your code clean and easy to read, so that when other people work on something you've worked on in the past, they would know how to build it further. And also another key aspect would be design literacy. So design literacy is important too, because as a front-end developer, UI developer, will be facing on the client side. It's what the users see when you land on the site. That's your work, and we're proud of it. So learning some design basics can help you a long way, because you learn the perspective of the designers, and you know what matters to drive user behavior and user action. So you kind of know the reasoning behind all those design work, and it helps makes the site prettier or more functional at the same time. And I think that to know that would make the work that will make you more proud, at least for me, make you more proud of the work you do, because it's actually making a change and a difference to how people experience the site. And also human interaction, soft skills. So when you're working as a developer, sometimes I know that you're just zoned into your computer, you're just hacking a bunch of code, trying to build out these new functions. But human skill is also critical, because learning to work on teams, you need to be able to communicate or raise questions and seek for help. And these are some human interactions that could take you a long way if you master it, because realistically, no one can build out a great application on their own. We always require help from other people. So it's great to be able to build relationships and extend your network, so that you become a more well-rounded developer as a general. Cool. So, and here's just a slide that shows you how different trends are growing. This is from, I think, 2012 to 2016. JavaScript was huge. jQuery was huge back then, but it's trending downwards. Angular and React, they're slowly trending upwards. React is pretty new, as you see here. It hasn't really started until 2014. Okay, now that that was a lot of overview on front-end development work. Let me just pause here for a little bit before I go down deeper. So this is front-end development. Let me see if I can answer some questions. So someone asked, if learning JavaScript will JavaScript still be covered? Yes, the JavaScript will be covered. It's in a later section. I will go on to that right away. What is the difference between web developer and other roles? Let me answer that. So web developer, I think that is more, it's more alongside uh, sorry, let me reframe my answer. So to me, a web developer knows how to work with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but they're not entirely sure about how to build an application using frameworks. So a web developer could be fluent in building out a static website that doesn't scale so well, as opposed to a front-end developer who has the knowledge and more focus on the framework of building an entire application. So also web developers, I think that was one of the big things back in 2012 when there's a lot of web developers who try to work on WordPress. So they do templates using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for WordPress. And so I hope that answers your question. Okay, someone asked why I think JavaScript is the most fundamental skill for front-end development. So JavaScript is most important because HTML, CSS is also a part of front-end development, but they could easily be, usually you need to create them once and you're set. So it's more like creating a template of HTML, which is also important, don't get me wrong, that's also important. But when you have a whole application going on, when you already have the HTML pages set, JavaScript is where the magic comes in, because it's where you get the response from the backend to populate your template with data, and JavaScript also comes into play when you want it to go from page to page or create go from page to page, and also send packets of information back to the backend as using asynchronous calls. And I want to point out that JavaScript is also plays a part in the backend role now with Node.js coming into play. That's why JavaScript sort of exploded like 2014 or so, 13, 14, because when Node.js comes into play, you can build out a full application from the backend to front end using JavaScript. So I hope that answers your question. And okay, let me move on first, and I'll get back to some of these questions later on, towards the end of the presentation. So, all right. So now you know HTML, CSS, JavaScript is what the fundamental of being a front-end development. I just want to, before I touch on the JavaScript part, I want to point out some of the HTML key concepts. So these are questions often asked in interview, and also really important to know to keep on top of the latest trend. So new elements in HTML5 that are not previous available. So this is important. Why? Because there's an introduction of semantic elements. What do I mean by that? Semantic elements. Semantic means that the word gives off its meaning. So what do I mean by that? Now in HTML5 we have header elements, footer elements, main elements that basically tells you what this element does. So it's semantic because it comes from its name. Header means that this is the header part of the website. So instead of before having to do like a div class equal header, now you can have a header element, structural element on your own. And as well as SVG for graphics, audio, so on and so forth. So I just want to touch base on that a little bit. And of course, there's input types too. There's a bunch of different new elements that I don't want to go too deep into. And also doc type. Why is doc type important? Because HTML5, it actually simplifies the doc type. As you know, doc type is actually required on all HTML pages because it tells the browser what document type you're using. Before HTML4, you used to normally this is, some browsers help you append this, but in HTML5, you would no longer need to write this entire line of code. You could just simply do doc type HTML so that a browser knows that this is the HTML page that you're serving. And meta tags. Why are meta tags? They're important because meta tags tells you, gives you the description or underlying information about your application. So usually it's good for SEO because you could set your description of your website, your title, and some of the keywords that you want the crawler, the search crawlers to index while not exposing them to the site. And also another important thing is you can create, using meta tags and using the meta attribute viewport, you could make website fit inside mobile browser to set their width. Otherwise, some desktop website that you made that is responsive, the width will going to be scaled entirely based on the desktop screen size. So with width equals device width, you will force the mobile web browser when they see this to fit the browser's device width, fit the browser's width according to the device. Okay, so that's it with HTML5 concepts, and more on CSS. Moving on to CSS now. So CSS, of course, the standard box model is really important. So what I mean by that, if some of you might not know, the padding, margin, and in terms of a box display position, how do you move things around in a block element? So that's really important, and just want to touch base on that. And Sass, what is Sass? Sass allows you to write CSS in a more object-oriented manner, because you can actually write CSS styling in a with a pattern that inherits from the parent. And it's if people who are interested in CSS, I will urge you to look into Sass, because it's already part, I would say most companies in the Silicon Valley, they use a preprocessor like Sass to organize their CSS styling. Otherwise, you would just be writing a lot of repeating styles. Sass allows you to nest different styles within a style sheet. And next is CSS naming conventions. So naming convention, BEM, what do I mean by this? Block element modifier. This is a new thing that's going on, and I would hope that it will be adopted by most companies, because it makes it, it gives a format to how we name our styles. Because as we all know, when we work on CSS pages, we tend to when we work on CSS pages, we tend to name different things based on developer. We tend to name things differently. So what BEM does is it forces you to look at JavaScript styling in a different perspective. So B means block. So what is a block? Block is usually something that you group up as an element, holding multiple elements, but can be grouped together. You call that a block. So this tab nav bar here would be a block, and the tabs inside would be an element. So E is element. So elements are within blocks. So and what is M? M is called the modifier. So M modifies elements within the block to make the styling more unique. So let's say I have tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, tab 4, but tab 3 is highlighted here. So I could make an M modifier to modify this specific tab that's highlighted. And as you see on the graph to your left, the picture to your left, blocks can be nested in different blocks, and that's how that loops back into the modularization I was talking about for sites, because we could have this login block modularized with its own block element, styles defined its own block element, and the search block also modularized, so we can reuse these pieces across the site. Okay, finally to the bulk, JavaScript key concepts. So HTML, CSS, like I said, important, but JavaScript is the core of what we do on a daily basis. So I mentioned the different libraries earlier already, so I don't want to go too deep into that, and just want to go straight into the concepts. So I will be talking about multiple JavaScript concepts that are really fundamental to any JavaScript programmer, any front-end developer. And it's also going to be, these questions are quite oftenly asked in all interviews for front-end development positions, because companies look for learning the fundamentals of JavaScript. They look for people who have a strong fundamental in just plain JavaScript, because they know that these developers with a strong fundamental can learn quickly and adapt to the different projects they're placed in. So there's JavaScript constructor, JavaScript prototyping and inheritance, and then JavaScript hoisting, JavaScript scope, querying, and then closure. So these are the topics that I'll touch on today. So starting with JavaScript constructor. What is a JavaScript constructor? So in JavaScript, every object has a constructor property, and it is the constructor, and this property is what that initializes the object. This is the definition of a constructor, but I would provide more example later. And so what is a prototype? So a prototype is an object. Prototype of an object is an internal property. And this might sound a little bit confusing first, but I just want to get the definition out of the way so I could explain it deeper. So it's internal property that can be referred to as prototype or proto. And this is proto is how most modern browser like Safari, Chrome, Firefox uses it. So there's also another thing called object.prototype, a property of the object called prototype. And this, keep in mind, this is different from the _proto property. And this might sound very confusing, but it'll be clear later, I promise. So okay, let's go straight into it. So prototype inheritance. So what I mean by brackets prototype and what is different from object.prototype is brackets prototype is actually, I want to make it simple, it's the ancestor. So it's the ancestor of the object that you inherit from. So in JavaScript, most ancestor would be when you trace the inheritance upwards from a function, you will reach object prototype, because all functions are objects, and objects is the basic building block in JavaScript. So prototype inheritance is how you look up the ancestral tree of an object or a function. And prototype setting properties is when you introduce a new method or property to an object. So I want to think of prototype. So this brackets prototype, please think of it as an ancestral tree. But this object prototype, which is what mentions here, is more about the blueprint of an object. So think of it as a stamp. If you carve something out of a stamp, when you stamp on something, that is permanent. Like if you carve a stamp with your name Alan on it, you can stamp it multiple times and Alan will be on it. If you carve another name called Sam underneath Alan onto that stamp, you stamp on it again, it will become Alan and Sam. So I would like to think of the object.prototype as a stamp, that it's a blueprint that you could be reused when you instantiate a new object. So on to the examples, and I'll make it clearer. So first of all, I want to talk about prototyping, and this prototyping is about the stamp that I was talking about. So we have a function here called sendMail. SendMail, and it reads an argument of my content, and it spits out this. It gives it a property called this.content will be equal to my content. So this is a function that we created on our own. But if we want to modify that function and create a blueprint of it, we could do so by adding another property or method onto the prototype of the object. So sendMail.prototype.title, we could set that to prototype. So now what we're basically doing here is we're telling, we're adding this title attribute to the blueprint of sendMail, so that when each new sendMail gets created, it will have a default title of prototype. And you can do so with properties like title, and same with methods here. So I could also add in a method to the prototype, the blueprint of sendMail, called printContent. And what this does, this would then console log this.content. So after I add these two new property and this property and this method to the prototype of sendMail, I would get, when I instantiate a new sendMail and gives it the argument, I am a new object and I can print. When you try to get the title of the new object here, you get prototype, because prototype is being set to sendMail. So as long as you instantiate sendMail, you get the title, default title of prototype. And when you, same thing as over here, if you print new object.printContent, you can then call this method because this is added to the prototype. So I hope that makes more sense in terms of how prototyping, the actual prototype of the object works. Okay, so, and this is also another example. So inheritance, right? So we want to talk about how we could modularize JavaScript code, and this plays a key role in helping you modularize your code. Because here, as you can see, we have a function called plant, and the country, we have a property called country, which said in Mexico is organic is true. And we create two different methods for the plant prototypes called show name and color, which shows its name and its color, and also am I organic, which returns I'm organic, baby, if the organic is set to true. And then we have another function here called fruit. So we have plant and fruit, but fruit is also a plant. So if we do fruit.prototype equals new plant, what this does is it inherits all the prototype methods and properties of plant. So interesting enough, you could have nested function or objects that kind of caters to what you want to do, but also you could have it inherit from a parent object that contains methods or properties that can be shared, more applicable to different areas. And you could simply do that by just instantiating the prototype of a new object to plant. So once you do this, you can when you create a new fruit object called a banana, when you do a banana.name, it reads off the name of the argument you read in, which is banana. But it also has the method of show name and color. So it inherits from the plant prototype, show name and color. So it will print out, I am this.name, which is banana, and my color is yellow. So that's it about inheritance. I want to kind of pause here to see if there's any questions. Let me see. So, someone asked if constructor is equal to prototype. I will get to that later, and just hold on tight. That's right next. And another attendee asked, does this work like inheritance in Java? So Java is more like a class-based inheritance, and it is similar, but because using a prototype, you can overwrite a prototype. So I wouldn't say it's the same as Java because you can't do that, but it's similar in ways, like I showed, that you can inherit the properties and methods. Okay. All right. I'll move on and we'll come back later. So, okay, on to constructors. This will help answer your question. So what is a constructor? Constructor, although I want to say we don't use this on a daily basis, this concept is asked, I would say, in my experience, in all interviews. So it's quite important to know because they want you to understand the fundamental before anything else. That's top in their priority. So constructor. So let's say I have my constructor function, my constructor blank in my constructor function. So when my constructor function is created, automatically there's a my constructor.prototype. It is, and this is created for all functions. So all functions we're bound to have a prototype. And when you instantiate that function, the prototype is set to itself. So sorry, my mistake. The prototype is set to the constructor of that object. So my constructor. So when you do my constructor.prototype.constructor, you get my constructor because that's what created that function. Constructor literally means the creator of the function or the object. And my constructor prototype would be, if you do my constructor.prototype, it will give you the function, because it is a function that we created, the function of what we put down as my constructor. But here is where the underscore prototype comes into play. So when the actual each function would also have an pointer prototype. Let me call that pointer prototype. So pointer prototype points to the your inheritance. So thinking it as like a family tree, the parent, my constructor's prototype would be a function prototype because it is a function. But the function prototype also has a pointer prototype, which points to object because all functions are objects. So that's what I meant by all functions comes down to points ultimately back to the object prototype. And as you can see here, my constructor.prototype is the object, and the prototype points to the object prototype. And I'll give more example later. I know this is very confusing. It's always difficult, especially when you come from a fresh background. But hopefully this, after I go through, it will be more clear. So the purpose of constructors that are created for each object is so that you can assign a common prototype on instant creation. So what I mean by that is each function gets a prototype property built in. And if it's not instantiated, then the function doesn't have such a property. What do I mean by that? So when you create a new function, the prototype would be an object because all functions are prototype. And so similarly, if you create var a equals function name and just a function that assigns this name to name, its prototype is also an object because the function is an object. But however, math.prototype, it's built-in functions. So that's why built-in functions are accepted. It doesn't have a prototype. It returns null. So, okay, I think this would better explain it too. So when we have var a equals function name, and it just assign this dot name equals the argument name. So when you do a.prototype, is it really, there's a.prototype and a._proto. Is it equal to each other? No, this will return false because a's prototype is set to its constructor's prototype property. In this case, it is the object. So the object over here is a's prototype. However, a.proto is a.proto, as I said, think of it as the ancestral path. So it traces back to the parent, what is a? A is a function. So a.proto is equal to function.prototype, the blueprint of a function. So the blueprint of a is not equal to a's ancestral parent prototype. It is instead the object a, because it is a blueprint of a. So if you do a.prototype, you could add on more methods or objects to it, but a.proto is just a point. a._proto is just a pointer that points to the parent. Okay. So trying to sum this up in simple terms. Constructor. So every object has a constructor property that refers to the constructor function that initializes the object. So if you do, so whenever object, if you do var a equals new function blah, the constructor will be that new function blah because that's the constructor that made a. Okay, so prototype, every object also has a prototype by default, but there's two prototypes, like I said. There's a prototype property, which is the pointer. So it's about inheritance. So in modern browsers, you could use _proto, and you could also use object.getPrototype of and plug in your object here. It points to the ancestor of the object. So let's say you create a function A and you create another function B that inherits from A. So if you do b.proto, the pointer proto, it will give you A. And if you do a.proto, it will give you the object prototype. As you can see here, if you do foo.proto, if foo inherits from bar, so if you do foo.proto, it will equal to foo prototype because that's the blueprint that creates it. But if you do foo.proto, because since it inherits from bar, the two traceback would give, the two-level traceback would return you bar.prototype. However, you can also do that a third level deep to get the bar prototype, which is the object.prototype. But if you try to go another level deeper, it will return you null, because object.prototype is the simplest, let's say it's the building block of all prototypes. Cool. So I hope that kind of clears it up a little bit. Okay, moving on. Here are some questions that I can walk over with you guys so that you get the concept more clearly, and we can do this together. So my object is equal to price. My object is the object and has an attribute of price, which is 2099, and has the method of get price, which return the price, this dot price. And custom object is equal to object.create my object. So it creates an object based on my object defined here. So, and then once it's created, we said custom object.price equals 1999. So it's equal to 1999. The price of custom object is 1999. And okay, once we delete custom object.price and we try to call the method get price, what would be returned in this case? So let's walk over it step by step. Let's rewind, and if we didn't delete custom object.price, when custom object.get price, it will call this method over here, get price function, return this price. But since you created the object and then assigned the price to it, get this dot price refers to the object's price, so you will return 1999. However, since you delete custom object's price, it no longer has a price. But since it's built from my object, it gets a default price of 2099. So when you delete custom object.price after you set it and call get price, you would see 2099. So it kind of shows you how inheritance works and how locally the new object created from the old object could overwrite the attribute of the blueprint that it came from, which is my object here. But once you delete that custom overwrite of the property, it returns you back to the original default price over here. Okay, question 2. So if I create a function A, function B, function C here, and I could manually set B.prototype is equal to a new A, and then C.prototype equals a new B. So essentially, B inherits from A, and C inherits from B. So when I do console log new A, I instantiate A, and to find A's constructor, I would get A. But when I do console log new B constructor, I would also get A. And same as C. So it points back, why do we get A here instead of the constructor? Why isn't it C or why is it B? The reason is when you derive a new instance from a constructor, it always points back to the base prototype, the base constructor and the base prototype. So even when we go 2 levels deep, the constructor will point back to the A that's been created, because we assign specifically A as the prototype of B. And that goes nested down to C, so C would also show A as its constructor. However, when we do new A instance of A, how come we will also get true, and new B instance of B is also true, and same for C. The reason because is instance of only traces the same prototype loop upwards to its parent, but the moment it finds that it matches with one of the with its constructor when it moving upward towards the tree, it stops right there. So essentially when you do new A, it traces, okay, what is instance of A? Is it from A? Yes, that's true. And okay, now B, when B comes, the derived constructor, it also checks the prototype to see whether it's from B. But once it reaches B first, it doesn't go another level up to A because it's already found B. So it would make this statement true, and the same for C. I hope that makes it more clear. So that's it. I think that's the end of prototype and prototype and constructors. Let me pause here for a little bit before I go to scope. See any questions? Okay, let me move on. I'll get to, I don't think a lot of people ask questions on, okay, hold on. Okay, there are some people that ask questions. So inheritance, define object inheritance attribute from the ones defined in prototype or constructor. Object inheritance attributes from the ones defined in prototype. Oh, object inheritance attributes from defined in prototype, not the constructor. Constructor tells you who made me, which function was I modeled after, but it doesn't really tell you it doesn't inherit the actual prototype. Prototype is the blueprint, and that's what you inherit the attributes and methods from. And in what cases can we use prototype? Prototype can be used, like I said, to build, to make building blocks out of your code. So let me give an example. So let's say we have we want to create a user attribute, user object. And user object common to everyone is a name, maybe age, and let's say city of birth. But if we want to create another object, this is a person's object with a name, age, and place of birth. But if we want to create another object that inherits from person's object, let's say employee, we can add in employee ID number. We can create a new employee object that is the make it the prototype, the person's object, which you will then inherit the name, date of birth, and place of birth. But then you could also add in extra attributes that groups employee within themselves, but also share the commonality with the person object that gives you the basic information about that particular person. So I hope that makes sense too. Okay, let me move on since we're a little bit tight on time. So JavaScript scope. Scope is the variable controlled by the location of the variable. So there's also global scopes and local scope. So global scope is variables defined globally that could be used by functions all around, while local variables are only available within that particular function or within that particular space. And these variable scope often cause confusion in loops because loops, they take time to complete, and by the time of completion, the variables within the loop may be changed by outside action already. So ES6 added new support for a let argument in loops, so that you could, instead of using a variable x or variable I equals 0 to blah blah, we can use let I, so that that I scope stays within that loop and doesn't get affected by outside manipulation. So pretty basic here. Local. So local, it could be Europe, right? Europe is a huge continent, and to use like continents as metaphors, Europe is a continent, but inside Europe there's France too, and France is a country inside Europe, and within France there's Paris. So we have Paris's scope only belonging here, but it inherits the scope from that the variables that are defined outside too. So it inherits from France, and France in turn inherits from Europe. So, and one thing to note is that local variables gain priority over global variables. So you can basically overwrite a global variable that was created locally. So when you have bar test equals I'm global here, and then you have test scope, a function test scope with a test equal I'm local. Essentially, when you do console log test here, when you run test scope, it overwrites out I'm local. But when you just output console log.test, it'll return global. So once you run test scope, as you can see, the output turns from global to local. Before you ran it, it will stay global. So it's important to keep track of your scope, because the variables you declare, if you don't pay attention, you might accidentally overwrite a variable, and this is called shadowing. So scope, the scope is important as in you have to be careful, but this is a basic concept that will tie into other more advanced concepts called currying and closures later on. So before I bring that to you, I also want to talk about hoisting. What is hoisting in JavaScript? So hoist is a verb meaning to raise. So as you see in this picture, it's to use a truck or to raise things upwards so that it can be seen from all parts of the areas, either from a factory or so that everybody can see it. So hoisting means to raise up. So what is it meant by JavaScript hoisting? So all declarations, both functions and variables, are hoisted to the top of the scope before any part of your code is executed. So this is extremely important, because the order of your code's execution matters, but functions and variables definitions are hosted to the top. And functions are hoisted first and then variable. So function declaration have priority over variable declaration, but not over variable assignment. So when you assign something to a variable, it doesn't really take precedent over declaration. And we'll see more on that in examples later on. So how do you think about hoisting, and how do you break apart the idea of hoisting to understand the code? So best way to think about it is to visualize them in two parts: declaration and assignment. So what do I mean by declaration? Declaration means when you declare like variable A equal to blah. When you do variable A, that's a declaration. You could end it right there. So you could break that down to variable A semicolon and then A equals blah. So that's the assignment part. A equals blah is the assignment, and variable A is the declaration. So let's run a simple example and see what would be the outcome of this. So show state. When you run show state here with this all this inside the same script, what would happen? So we have a function show state with console log ready, and a var show state equal function console log idle. So there's a function show state and a variable show state, but what would happen? So as you can see, this is the same code as the one before, and we're just gonna break it down so that we see step by step what's happening. Like I said, functions are always hoisted to the top, and variable declaration is hoisted to the top. So when you run this code, essentially what's being done behind the scene is function.showState is moved to the top of the script. So it is already on, it's moved to the top. So the function's already defined here, over here. And then variable declaration gets moved to the top. So var show state gets moved to the top too. However, important to note that the declaration, the assignment of the variable is not moved to the top and stays where it is. So if you see show state from the left-hand side, it actually moved down to actually further down than where we imagined. So when we run show state in this state over here, it actually outputs ready and not idle because the assignment of show state is not run after it. But the function hoisting and the variable declaration hoisting are moved to the top. So hopefully you see where this is headed. And vice versa, we could manipulate the order of the same script and it would produce a different outcome. So if you compare these two slides, I have show state first, function show state, and then variable show state equals function. Here I have variable show state equals function, and then the function show state and show state. So once again, let's break this down. So function equals show state will still be moved to the top because it is a function and it takes priority. But then variable declaration, variable show state, also declared here and assigned at the same time. So it gets declared and it gets assigned right after. And then you reach show state. So in this time, when we run show state, instead of producing console log equals ready, it gives us idle because show state essentially overwrites from the function show state because idle is placed behind or executed after the function is defined. So it's important to know hoisting because this is also appears on most front-end developer interviews, and the interviewees are going to try to have a question like this to test whether you understand the concept of hoisting. So question 1, let's walk through this together again. So if variable a equals 1, function b equals 10, and a equals 10, and then you return, and then the function a is defined here. So this is kind of messy. So what would this function look like, or what would this return essentially? So like I said, function. Let's go inside function b first and see what's inside. So function a, this is the function, so it gets hoisted first, and it behaves like variable a equals function. And in local scope, a is going to be created. But if you have the same variable with the same name and you're in a local scope, function b here, so the local a equals 10 would overwrite the variable a outside. So when you set a equals 10 here, you are setting the local variable a and not the global one. So the global value remains unchanged, and you get 1 when you do console log a uh, when you if you when you set a equals 10 here, you're setting a local variable a and not the global one. So the global one remains the same and you get 1. But if you don't have a function named a as defined, you will see a equals 10 in the log. So this is kind of confusing, but once you understand the concept, it'll be easier. Let's do this one again. So we have function foo and function bar here, and this is kind of messy. So what would this be? So when a function gets hoisted, the first bar is on the top, and the second bar that would be returned would also be hoisted. But since there's already a bar here, it still gets first place. The second bar only moves up. So when you run return bar here, calling foo, it will actually return 8 and not 3, because since this is placed further down and it gets hoisted, it will get hoisted here in the middle, and then return bar will switch place with them. But since return 8 is executed below or after the first return 3, foo would return 8. Hopefully that makes sense, and it will help you in your interview on hoisting. Okay. All right. Currying now. So currying, what is JavaScript currying? Currying is a technique. You might think of Curry or Stephen Curry, but curry is actually a technique in JavaScript for partial evaluation. What do I mean by partial evaluation? It means that it can transform a function with multiple arguments into the same function, but with fewer arguments, and pass in multiple steps. So a sentence to describe it will be a function that returns a function requiring a function that returns a function that requires additional arguments. And a funny fact, why it's named Curry, it's actually named after Haskell Curry, who worked on functional programming. But a way that I would like to remember it is currying, since it has the word curry in it, and curry, to build a recipe of curry, you need to require multiple spices and steps. So you add in multiple steps along the way, like you add in multiple spices to the pot to brew your curry. So that kind of helps me remember that currying is a function that returns a function requiring additional arguments. Okay, so currying. How does currying work? Currying works by passing an argument, breaking down a function. So see here, we have baby animal as a function, and it takes an input of a. However, it returns another function requiring another input, b. Then it prints out the result, I love a and b. So essentially, currying allows us to first load a function with one argument. So baby lion equals baby animals lion. So we loaded our first argument. But then we can use this variable assignment to this first part of the curried function, and then pass in different arguments to it. So baby lion tigers will return, I love lions and tigers. Baby lion elephants will return, I love lions and elephants. So this is a powerful tool because you can pass in arguments in multiple steps, and you can set a preset for one argument, but then call multiple instances of this preset and pass down different arguments with it. So why is currying helpful? I would give you a real world application too. So it will be helpful in Node.js callbacks because it can be integrated with callbacks to create factory functions. And this is super useful in event handling because it can allow event handling to be called asynchronously or sequentially as you like, because now we have we can first set the first attribute and then have it call later. What do I mean by this? We'll see. So this is a typical read file function from Node.js, and it has 3 arguments: path, and then the callback function when the file is being read. So when so console log data. So when you execute this this read file sentence, the file will be read and processed in the background, and then the console log would happen because it will execute the next line of code, which is after calling read file. However, console log data, which is the content of the read file, would only be logged after the file has been complete and done reading with. So a way that we can use this to help us streamline or invoke different callbacks is that we can curry it. We can curry the read function using a function probably called curry read file. So when we curry the read file function, then we can take in just one argument at a time. So we can take in an argument path, like the same sentence here, but we only take in a path, first argument path. And then we can assign it to a read variable and then use that read variable to execute the callback function. Let me give you an example. So we have read, if we have 2 files we want to read and we want to have it read sequentially, we can have read A equals curry read file A. So immediately when the code sees this line, it gets executed right away, read A. But it will be reading in the background until we need it when we call the callback function. And read B as well. So when read A and read B is instantiated, both files are read parallel. And then when we really want the callback of the data, we can call read A and pass in the callback function, error data A. And within it, we can have read B in it too, so that read B gets called right after read A is instantiated. So we can process sequential and sequential read files compared to the old Node.js, not the fresh, the original read file from Node.js. This is powerful because this allows the front-end developer to playing with Node.js to read multiple files at the same time, and you can arrange these order in however way you like to, whether sequential or parallel. Okay, and continuing on to curry, we can, so how do you, to make use of currying, a lot of the basic function doesn't implement currying, but we could force these functions into a curry function. So we can curry functions by creating a curry it function. That this basically takes the different array, or the different multiple arguments inside one function and breaks it down so that it can be into parts. So when we have a variable sequence here, it takes in 2 functions at first, start and end. So when we run the curry it function, essentially this slices the number of arguments it takes in and takes it one step at a time. So we can do curry it sequence and just pass in 1, which is a start. And then we can instantiate that to call sequence 5. And in sequence 5, when you pass in 5, it prints out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because the 1 you already set earlier. And this is helpful when you have a model of a method that you want to use, but you want it to be applicable to many different parts of the area. You could assign it to you could give it one argument and assign it to a variable first, and then quickly give it a second element later on when you need it, instead of giving everything, both elements together at once. So I hope that makes sense about currying. And closure. So closure. So JavaScript closure is like a first-class function. In JavaScript, first-class function are functions that are can be used, passed in as objects or like any other data type. So they could have methods, they could be called, they could be passed on, could be returned. So in JavaScript, functions acts as objects. So they are called first-class functions because they can be manipulated. And functions have their own property and method, just like an object, and can be constructed. So what is a closure? So a closure in JavaScript, because functions have that property of like an object, it could be called within a function. So what call function within a function? What do I mean by that? So that's the definition of closure. Calling a function within a function. So a closure is an inner function that has access to the outer function's variable, as well as its scope chain. So it has its own scope. That's why we talked about scope earlier, because closures is scopes is a key part of understanding about closure, because closure involves nested functions and function within functions. So we have to be very careful about our scope. So our scope B here has access to a scope. And what a closure means is when we define a function and within that function it has another function. And when we call that function inside the parent function, it creates a closure because this B function creates its own closed scope that protects it from outside manipulation. And what do I mean by that? So to give you a basic rundown, so when I have an add function and I pass in value 1, value 2, and there's a function inside the add function that's called doAdd. It adds in operand 1, operand 2, and then it returns operand 1 plus 2. So it adds them together. When we return doAdd and pass in value 1, value 2, and assign add to foo will, of course, equal to 3. But since we can simplify this since the nested function will inherit or has the access to the outside scope, so it will have access to value 1 and value 2. So essentially, we don't have to do operand 1 and operand 2. We can essentially return value 1 plus 2, and then doAdd. It will also equal to 3. So these two are both closures because it returns the function within a function. It calls a function within a function. So, okay, this is a useful real-world application of closure. So IE doesn't support callbacks using setInterval, and sometimes we use setInterval to show a pop-up after a certain seconds when users visiting a site. So instead of displaying some message, if we have this this function add event on page load, and we set interval to 1 second to pop up to show some message, and we have a show message here inside the same script, we actually don't get anything. We get undefined because IE doesn't allow you to it doesn't take in this extra argument. But how can we do to help that, or to solve this problem for people who are on IE? So we can use closure. So when we have a function called getClosure, and then within that function there's a function called showMessage, we can insert that message, and we can pass that message on to the getClosure function here, and then have it return that show message, because this show message since it's a closure, it will preserve that message scope when you load in gets closure and input some message here. It would save that message, and that message would get executed on call when you do window.setInterval, because show message here is defined to get closure some message, and that message, because of it being a closure, a function called within a function, it gets protected and it gets called instantly. And this is called encapsulation in JavaScript, because it allows you to emulate private data. So private data doesn't, that data and within that scope of the closure stays within that scope. So let me give an example. So this is an example of data being exposed. So you have this function called person name. You input a name. This dot name would give you name, but we put an underscore there to make it like a constant. So this dot get name, we have a function here, and this will also return this dot underscore name defined over here. But when we do variable, when we instantiate variable person equals new person Colin, we give the person the name of Colin, and then we do person dot name equals Tom. You expose the name object when you create a new person. So person dot get name, when this function, you call this function, now returns Tom instead of Colin. And sometimes we don't really want to do that because we might make a mistake and to overwrite something that we don't desire to do. So in that case, that's where closure comes into play, because if we, instead of making assigning underscore name to this dot name, we make it a variable so that we assign to a variable. We can easily do same thing, new person Colin, but person.name is Tom. If we set that name as Tom, person.name will return Tom, but person.getName would return Colin instead. So listen, when we return the closure, we get the name Colin instead of Tom. And this protects your data from outside manipulation. And so this is a key part too for closure, because closure gets fairly complicated. So on event load, when it's in a loop, when it's in a loop, the scope of the variable often gets manipulated by outside. So what do I mean by this? When I do variable I equals 1, I smaller than 4, I plus plus, and we get the button and the element by the ID. And when we add an event listener click to alert us of the button when a button is clicked, when we click on any button, it will give us 4, because by that time it would have already run through all the loop and it will produce 4. So there's 2 ways of solving this. And if we want to have the button give us the actual button that's clicked. So 2 ways of solving this. One is immediately invoke function expressions, which is a good way, but it's it gets a little messy and it's not clean enough. In my perspective, in my opinion. So you could actually, so what is an immediately invoke function expression? When you put parentheses around a function like this, and then you pass in parentheses I right after it, it gets instantiated, it gets invoked right away. So when you actually click on that button, and this I that gets passed down would be the I of the actual element of the button that you're clicking on, instead of 4 when you click on it over here using this script. So that's an example of immediately invoked function. But when you use closure, when you click on a button I, you can create a function called get handler over here, and then basically use that as a callback instead of writing the function over here. Because when you create a function called get handler that returns another function called get handler, passing the parameter I down, this I gets preserved. So when I equals 1 and you click on it, it actually gets preserved with the closure. So I would be 1 over here, and it will immediately alert you that the click button is 1 instead of 4 when you click on all the buttons. So that kind of ends my summary with the key concepts of JavaScript. So a lot to take in, I know, and each of these topics can be dived in even deeper. So I just want to quickly go over the next section. So how to prepare for interviews, because I know you guys have a lot of questions and we're kind of running out of time. So so interview process. Of course, resume is really important, and as a front-end developer, I think you should have a clean and easily readable resume to kind of show off your UI and design knowledge or know-how. So among that, people like to see actual successes that you've done on your resume. So numbers, if you could provide key metrics, that's really good too. And also if you provide examples on CodePen, LinkedIn, or GitHub, that would also be great. So let me just give an example. This is something I created for using CodePen to demonstrate HTML, CSS animation. So this is something I created was a couple years ago that actually demonstrates to gain traffic for recruiters or HR to kind of show off your technical know-how. So that's good. It's good to have a code repository somewhere that could show your skills. And of course, resume, you wanted a clean design. So I found the best way is to list down your professional experience first, because that's what they're most interested in. They want you to have experience, and if you don't, that's fine too. But maybe show some side projects that you've worked on that's really exciting to you, and list your technical expertise here, because they really want at a glance to see what you know just by looking on that single page. So a clean format is what I recommended. So this is my resume over here, and this is another person's resume that I found online, which he also lives, which is also around this area in Millbrae. But I like his resume because it's also cleanly designed with highlights and sections that grabs the reader's eye. And aside from resume, an important thing to have is portfolio. So I mentioned that I have a CodePen experiment, or this sandbox over here. So it's good to have work that show off, because people are visual creatures. They want to see what you've done. And that would be a better way of showcasing that to them than just describing it. So it's good to have your own website, and that's a great way to establish good impressions. So out of the box solution, there's Squarespace that you can use if you're not too good at coding yet, or even WordPress themes that you can modify for yourself, or you could build your own and using a template like Bootstrap or Foundation. And I would recommend people to start playing with small projects and showcase, even if it's HTML, simple HTML, CSS, JavaScript work, showcase it on your website. If it's not a running application, at least they know that what you're working on and that you're actually learning while doing things. So let me give some examples of the websites. This is my own portfolio. website, and it kind of showcases the stuff that I did in the past. I haven't updated this in a while, but I think most of these websites, they want to kind of showcase, you want to kind of showcase your skill here. So I use like a carousel here to kind of demonstrate, and I use you can see here the A is gradually like the shining effect. This is done using SVG. So you kind of want to put on your portfolio website some cool tricks that you learned along the ways and kind of make it your showcase. And of course, you want to put your work and kind of describe what you did in the past. So this is what I did. I worked at NIH in the past, like I described. So I put down some of the stuff I made along the way, screenshots of, this is back in 2012 when I was making this MRI system for the physicians at NIH. So yeah, so showing your work is a great way to get results if you're looking to find a job. And here I provided a couple other websites that are good examples of showcasing UI UX or UI developer work. So it doesn't have to be that complex. It could be like a single site like this. This is not this page, Catherine. It's not even scrollable, but it at least showcases your work that you have somewhat a basic skill level of creating your own site. And here is another example that and has a carousel as user input, which is pretty cool, and basic description of what he does, his work, projects that he works on. So yeah, so these are some examples. I provided a couple other more so that you can see. So job searching. So I think a key stuff that that's important is networking. Networking, there's a saying that your network is your net worth. So if you know more people that's involved in this industry, you get to learn more from them, and they could kind of pull your way up if you're trying to get opportunities or find new or try to land a job in front-end development or even any programming in that sense. Network just broadens your whole reach to these companies. And also research, know yourself. That's important. You need to know where you stand and where you're trying to be, where you're trying to go in the next couple years, so that you can actually plan out the roadmap and just be realistic to yourself and to stick with your goals. And also know that if you're a beginner JavaScript developer, you probably shouldn't aim too high, and you should take it one step at a time. And so closing statements, I'm running pretty tight with time. So as I mentioned earlier, JavaScript, there's a lot of different frameworks out there, and there's going to be more coming. I assure you that. But so the foundation work is really important. So that's why I want to introduce these key concepts in this introductory presentation, because companies are looking for people who know the basics JavaScript very, very well, as opposed to someone who know only a little JavaScript but know like the Angular framework or React framework, because those frameworks can be picked up fairly quickly. If you just spend like a month or like working just trying to understand Angular, when you master JavaScript fundamental, you'll become very good at Angular very quickly. So learn the fundamentals. That's one key thing. And patterns. So in JavaScript patterns, there's a methodology that all programmers will use. Don't repeat yourself. DRY, dry. So keeping a code dry. So we want to continue to modularize the code and making functional programming in JavaScript stand out. So we don't want to repeat ourselves. So leads back to my analogy with Lego building blocks. So ES6 and ES7. So ES6 was introduced last year, and there's already ES7 that's coming. So it's interesting enough to know about these new concepts and the new way, the new grammar, I would say, of JavaScript. But if you're a beginner, I would say stick with the fundamentals first, because these you can really pick up. It's just a different way of writing code, but essentially the fundamentals would never change. So if I want to sum it in 2 words, it's JavaScript foundation is key. So I hope this introduction presentation will give you like an eye-opener or give you an overview of what JavaScript does. And even for the more intermediate JavaScript developers, I hope it kind of gives you a review of the core concepts in JavaScript. And of course, there's a lot of topics that you could branch out from this. Knowing JavaScript, you know Node.js, you could dive deep into that so you could be a more full stack developer. And also cross-browser testing, cross-platform testing, A/B testing, all these I could lead. There's too much you could learn, and there's more coming each year. So these are a few topics I listed down as interesting to explore further. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of questions, and I'm gonna pick some interesting ones that I can answer quickly since we're out of time. A lot of this are let me see. Someone asked, is this similar concept as base class derived in Java or C++? I assume you're talking about prototyping, and it is similar, like I mentioned, but you can also override that prototype of the object when you wish to. So sort of, and not, but not really. Since JavaScript is not really a class or oriented type of language, so I would say it's not entirely the same. And there's no difference between show state and show state. So show state and show state, I assume you're talking about here. Show state, there's a variable show state and a function show state. So when you run a show state without the parentheses, it's referring to the variable show state. And also when we put down the parentheses right after a statement, that actually means to execute the function right away. So which is why when I was talking about the immediately invoke function expression, we put down a parentheses over the function and then a parentheses and then put in the argument inside the parentheses. Okay, let's see. What is the advantage of using hoisting? Well, I want to point out hoisting is actually it's more like a key concept of how JavaScript works, and it's not an advantage. It's more like how you understand how the machine reads your code when you're writing. And that's important because the sequence of your statements are important and would affect what the outcome would be if you don't be careful. So so I would say the advantage of understanding hoisting is that you make fewer mistakes, and you know what exactly the code is going to output, and they test you on that in interview because they want you to be able to read the code and know what the output is. And okay, someone also asked, as a front-end developer for interview, will a company test system design and data structure? In my experience, no, but they would ask you about big O notation, which I didn't dive too deeply into this time because that's too much jam-packed into one presentation, and I could branch it off probably in another lesson or so. But for example, which level in leak code is enough? So system design and data structure, I haven't used leak code for a while, but I think if you have a basic or to intermediate knowledge, you will do fine. They do test you concepts on JavaScript, on JSON, and how you manipulate the data using array and all that. But from most of my experience, they don't really dive that deep, to be honest. Okay. I think I've answered some of these questions before. In what cases we can use prototype? Like I said, when you're trying to inherit from the parent object while not trying to interfere with the original or the common properties or methods shared. Like the person object is a good example. When you want to create a person, employee from a person object, or even like employees or different sections group under persons, you could keep them isolated from the base blueprint of that person. Do we really need to learn SAS to get a job? To get a job, no, but to do well on a job, yes, because most company, I believe, will be using SAS. Another person that's fourth-year student majoring in chemical engineering, learning C language would feel like it's a big gap between what I learned in school and skill set actually needed. What classes in university would think worth taking? Okay, so it's I actually think if you wanted to learn web development or just development in general, it's actually best to just take lessons like these online, because maybe in academia, not all classes are up to date. So or like follows the latest industry standards. So like lectures online or on YouTube, they probably provide a better vision and better perspective of how the technology is now, and you probably learn more from them. What strategy would you recommend to merge to CS field? Yes, you could do a boot camp, or you could, boot camp would be easier because you will have guidance on the way, or take a lesson or class like this and just a lot of practice after the classes, because programming is like a language. If you go to like a Japanese class or a foreign language class, you only go to the class but you don't practice it afterwards, you won't remember it at all. So you just gotta keep your head at it and just keep practicing. Okay, any comments on Angular 2? Angular 2 is cool. I've used it before, the directives, but I think it's still going to be a huge impact on the industry. A lot of companies are still using it, but the trend is that they're migrating over to React. So yeah, I think that kind of covers some of the more important questions that that I saw from you guys. Great books to learn JS. Depending on your level, I think some of the O'Reilly books, they divided up into different sections, and maybe I will provide a book list later on, and but they're depending on what you want to learn for JS, there's like a couple different levels, so really depends on your level. So this is O'Reilly, the company I mentioned. So I actually recently read this book on promises that was really helpful. But like I said, they divide up the books into several different levels of experience, and also dive in different areas, because JavaScript is also a huge beast, and there's new ES6 on the way as well. So I can't really recommend you anything unless anything specifically unless I know your level of experience. But yeah, this is one book I would recommend if you want to learn promises. Okay, so I think that's it for today. I thank you a lot for attending my presentation. I hope everyone at least got something out of it. And thanks for everyone for attending. And I wish you a well career in whatever you're pursuing. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.